as long as they understand or they appreciate it.
Cute. But yeah, it was an amazing call.
Yeah, I just felt that it was. So
here we are.
Before we go live, though, Tass.
Yeah.
Just between you and I, everybody should be signing up for foundations because it was that good.
We probably shouldn't bring that up on here in front of everybody. Just keep
I don't want people to think that we're just always like trying to sell, but
sell.
For people who really want to really grow their school, I think they should join my foundation.
I have a better plan though. We don't have to tell them anything. If they just give us 10% over what they make right now, we can do that too. Just on their growth.
Yeah, we'd be wealthy.
We would be wealthy.
Oh my gosh, we're live.
Oops. Hey, everybody.
Do not bring up mayafoundations.com. I don't want that to be about this.
That's right. That's right.
Mr. Levy.
Hey,
awesome.
Mr. Levy, Miss Julie.
Awesome form.
Yeah, I saw that.
Miss Julie. Yeah, look sharp. Everybody looks sharp. So, it's interesting. The topic today is retaining black belts. Of course, everybody wants to retain all their students, but I wonder if people really understand the importance of retaining black belts.
Shelby.
Long time.
Hey. She needs one more hey in there. Hey. Hey, it's days like these that I wish sometimes I was in Florida, Metz. It's 32, and you're going to say the opposite. You're like, oh, I'd love to be there. It's 32. There's about an inch of snow on the ground. It's supposed to get brutal cold this weekend. 63 and sunny.
Yep. Beautiful here. Mr. Lewis, Mr. Para from Tennessee. Hello, Mr. Vincent. Miss Tippett has a quick question. Let's put it up there.
Ooh, we may debate on this one, Metz.
Well, okay. Quick question. Do you record a quit when they stop coming or when they stop paying? Some people quit but continue to pay until their agreement ends. Well, we may debate on this one, but at the end of the day, it's how you define an active student as far as who is active. And at the end of the day, the way my team and the way we should be doing it is, if they're coming to class at least 4 times a month and current on their dues, they're active. If they're not active. Now, people say, well, what about if they go on vacation and they're out for 2 weeks? That's a freeze of time. They still make their payments, but that's a freeze of time. So you can consider them still active because you just know. But if they never came back, or if they were supposed to come back and they didn't come back in that 3rd month, and you're calling them and you can't get them, then they would become deactivated from an active count. But
deactivated,
not active.
So yes, so we do agree. Here's I think a mistake, and just because I think this is a fair statement, right? I'm involved. I've been involved in a lot of different CRMs, and I think a big mistake that people make is they look at their what the CRMs would call your active members. I think there's some confusion there. And I've said to a lot of CRM companies that number should really be considered your roster number, not an active member. Number one. Number two, we wait and we don't purge people out. What happens is you may have a roster of, I'm giving an example, 200 students, but you may only have 130 students as an example that showed up for class over the course of the month of January. Well, to me, you have an active of 130, not 200, right? And so, and Metz and I figure out, the active count very similar that way. But even if those other 70 people are still paying, I want to know I've got 130 active. And the reason why is if they stop showing, eventually they stop paying, right? And so I want to kind of have a heads up on that ahead of time. A good question.
Right. So yeah. So, but by the way, here's my advice. However you define an active count, just stay consistent.
Right. Right.
And just, stay consistent in how you track that stuff. So talking about
quitters,
how well do you retain your black belts? And why is that so important to not just your martial arts school, the martial arts aspect of your school, but also your business? So does anybody want to tell me how well they retain black belts? And I could be psychic and tell you the answers we're going to get. Somebody's going to tell me how long, I have black belts that have been with me for 20 years. That doesn't tell me how well you retain black belts, though.
Right.
It tells me how you retained the black belts that you've had for 20 years, just not the ones that you haven't kept for 20 years. Do you guys keep track of how well you retain black belts? Do you keep track of how well you retain any student?
I think that's you just hit on something that I think you just touched on for a second. Again, depending on how you define a quit, right? One of the next steps that I would take is I would go through and figure out where are people quitting on that journey, and it will tell you a lot of about the different holes that you have in your game, and maybe you're going to see a lot of quits at yellow belt, as an example. If you go from white to yellow, maybe you're going to see the majority of quits at white. Maybe you're going to see your second biggest quit rate is at black belt. And typically that's pretty common, right? It's in the beginning phase, and it's when they've achieved that black belt is when we see the biggest attrition. But if you know where it's at, and I'll go there, if it is yellow belt or orange belt, and you don't have an upgrade program or a higher level of training for them, that may be part of the reason why you're losing so many people early on. It could be a curriculum challenge. You may have a lot of people at green belt that quit. Well, maybe your curriculum's too hard at green belt, but if you track those numbers, here's the deal. It always comes back to this, and it's never sexy, but it's track this stuff and look back at it, because it will show you where your holes are. And then you can go back and you can make educated, decisions as to what you want to do to fix those and plug those holes.
Look at Mr. Walls.
Dang.
Well, way to make him feel good, Cass.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty good. I use 99% of those.
Mr. Walls, you're not alone.
And by the way, thanks for your honesty. I mean,
yeah, you know what? And that's important too. Some of you just listen and you don't comment because maybe you're afraid to comment, or you're afraid Tass will judge you and say something like, dang, or, whatever. But if you participate, we can help you more. But let's talk about, before we talk about the importance, just reality. I see that. Before we talk about the importance of retaining a black belt, why don't we talk about how to do it better than whatever you're doing now?
Right.
So I'll just open this up and start the first part of this.
This could be a note taker. I'm just saying, this could be a note taker moment.
It could be. It could be. So let's talk. And again, I want to talk about how important it is. And by the way, we'll ask these questions, but before I tell you how to retain your black belts better, before I tell you how to do it, tell me what it is that you do. What do you do to retain your black belts? Do you do anything different to retain your black belts than you do any other student? Put it in the
I have a psychic moment coming. I'm going to say they either charge less or they come for free once they get black belt.
We charge less or charge for free, or we don't charge. Well, let's see. We have seen more quit this year than in the past because we have not been able to partner up as much. Okay. Note takers, get ready. Does anybody want to tell me what they do to retain their black belts? differently than what you do to retain any other student? Anybody? Anybody? All right. Well, this is going to be a boring show for us, Tass.
Yes.
Currently, no. I need to put Mr. Vincent. Currently, no. Need to put some focus in this area for sure. Continue that they continue to pay the same. Okay. All right. Oh, whoa. Now they're flying in.
Hey, slow down, people. Slow down.
Black belts are eligible to take my class. It's the only one I consistently teach. Okay, Mr. Levy being the master. And
Dun, dun, dun. Thank you, sir, for being honest.
thank you. Charge less. Special class just for them is one. Okay. Started a 10-point stripe system. Okay. As soon as they get their black belt, we have a meeting with them, letting them know what the next steps are. And it depends on what those steps are, will determine whether we retain them or not, right? But let's see. I try to pre-frame color belts to understand that black belt is not the end of the journey. I understand that. And that was my psychic moment. I was going to say we would have somebody say that, which isn't wrong. It's just a common answer. Charge less, but encourage them to open their own studio. Very good. Mr. Weaver, or I can send you some of my business cards. You can have them call me, and I can offer them an incredible martial arts opportunity if they don't want to open their own studio. Just throwing it out there. Created black belt techniques for them. Okay. Different curriculum. Unfortunately, nothing much for Mr. Manili. Okay. Well, now we're getting some stuff. Every 3 months earn a stripe. Special class, separate class, still needs work. We take our black belts to the Martial Arts Super Show and share a huge
Hoys.
A huge hoys.
Maybe they share a huge house, like they rent a house.
Maybe it's house. We run a class. Okay, work together. We test our black belts every 3 months in different ways. They receive a module color star that goes on their belt. They also get privilege. Wow. Okay, guys, this is awesome. So let me give you some of my thoughts, because these thoughts are great, right? We also have separate classes for black belts only, different curriculum as well, charge the same. Yes, house, Mr. Hogue. Also began testing multiple steps between ranks rather than many years. All right, let's talk about it. So let's talk about that, Mr. Hogue. So if you want to retain your black belts better, let's go over a couple ideas that you can do to retain your black belts better. Number one, think about the journey to black belt. There is some type of consistency in there where they're getting a new belt every X amount of months or time. There's a period of time and they're getting a new belt, right? You have to understand it has nothing to do with the belt. It has to do with the fact that they're being rewarded. And I think we touched on this last week, I think, right? So once they get their black belt, you should continue with that. And by the way, I think the stars, I think the stripes are great. But that's not what they've been doing for years and years, is just getting a stripe. They've been getting a new belt and a certificate, and it's a real big difference. I would encourage you to look at Century, and there's training belts, right? So I said this last week on the call, I think, on this thing, whatever this is. I think
I did, but you can take credit for it, Metz, because it was your idea. So that's fine.
Oh, maybe you did. One of us did. I just want to make sure that people don't know we're redundant and repeating, but repeating is important. Between first degree and second degree black belt, it takes 2 years with us, right? But you can't have people like consistently test and then all of a sudden nothing changes visually, okay, for 2 years. So in X amount of time, they'll get a white belt with a white stripe. In X amount of time, a white belt with a yellow stripe. In X amount of time, a white belt, not a stripe, but the solid stripe through the black belt, to really show that they're not a new black belt. They're an experienced black belt. They're just not at second degree yet. That helps tremendously. That's number one. Do you want to give one? And I have another, but do you want to throw one out there on how to retain their black belts?
Well, yeah. So, this is something that we just added this in a couple years ago, right? And when you hear us normally talk about, this is this is done by design. So I don't want you guys to think that we're contradicting what we tell you to do, right? When we talk about equipment packages, typically we're talking about charge separately for an equipment package. Well, because retention was a struggle with black belts, we decided to up our testing fee and include the equipment that they're going to be using when they become a black belt. So for us, that's a Muay Thai target. They get their black belt T-shirt that they can't buy it. They can only earn it by testing for black belt. They're going to get their, a couple other things that they get for training. By the way, when Metzger said training belt, just so we're clear, we don't do the black belt with a white stripe and embroider it, right? It's just the black with a white stripe. They have their show belt, their embroidered belt, and then they have the black stripe belts that they use, that they progress every, in our case, every 3 months. But yeah, so we do include the equipment package. And the idea behind that is when they come to their black belt test and they graduate, they leave with their training belt. They leave with their embroidered belt. They leave with their certificate. They leave with all their new training gear. And this now is the idea is to get them excited to start coming to black belt classes, as opposed to, okay, Saturday, my test is over. I'm done. I earned my black belt. I did it. Now we encourage them to come into the class.
And Mr. Manila, yes, for adults too. Remember, it's a training belt. Now the student, whether they're an adult or a child, can choose to wear their embroidered black belt that has their name on it, and their embroidered black belt, or their training belt that they want to come to class all the time. And it's up to them. But we still want to present them something, consistently with time to show their progression to make sure that they feel different than someone who got their black belt yesterday, as opposed to them who got it a year and a half ago. And they're a higher level black belt, in their training. So that's number one. Number two is what Tassoul just said. So we did come up with this a couple years ago, but you know how awesome it is in TAS? I don't know if you've seen it, but when they come to their black belt graduation, their ceremony, black belt testing for us is 6 months. It's a 6-month process. And they got to pass phases of that test. 2 months, they got to test on a certain phase. 2 months, they got to test on phase 2. 2 months, they got to test on phase 3. If they pass all 3 phases, they're now eligible to come to the black belt test, which is grueling, and a one-day thing where myself and Mr. Silverman go to that. But when they earn that and they get their training belt and they get their embroidered belt, like he said, and they get their black belt T-shirt, which again, you can't buy it. Only black belts can wear that T-shirt. You get your T-shirt. Then they get their big red and black from Century Muay Thai pad, because now they're going to start learning some Muay Thai, and nobody else can get those pads. We don't sell them to anybody else, right? And if somebody wants to buy them off market, they can, but they can't come to class with them. But they get this when they're walking out of there with their certificate and they have all this stuff. There's a level of excitement. They're ready to they can't wait to get back to class now to start experiencing this difference and feel and look different, especially if you can't have a separate black belt only class. The worst thing you could do is have somebody get their black belt and then Monday they just go right back to the same class with advanced students, red belts and whatever your advanced belts are, red belts, brown belts, whatever. That's okay, but you should absolutely have a separate black belt only class. But if you have them in the same class, there should be a period where we separate them, because the black belts look different. They have different training equipment than the other students, and they're doing something different. They're working on something different. So that package is really important. The next thing is curriculum. So what is it? And let me tell you what it shouldn't be predominantly. It can be, because we also have, again, I want to make sure everyone understands, there's required curriculum in whatever art that you teach, whether it's Kung Fu, Taekwondo, Karate, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Ishin-Ryu, Shito-Ryu, whatever. There's a required curriculum. So there should be some forms or katas, if that's what your curriculum, dictates, that you may have to know from 1st degree black belt to 2nd degree black belt. But that can't be the selling point. It can't be like, now you're going to start learning black belt forms. Because for the majority of people, especially kids, and not everybody, so don't argue, because it just is, forms become boring, especially kids. So you have to have some kind of element to your black belt curriculum that's more exciting, that's a higher intensity in their training, where they look, feel, and train differently. And by the way, if you're having trouble coming up with a first to second degree curriculum. You can break it into quarters, quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then repeat it the second year to become more proficient to get that second degree, as opposed to you got to learn this curriculum in quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then second degree. Well, how do you become proficient if it's always just learning something new and trying to memorize, as opposed to apply, application of technique, right? So nice-ish and Rue shout out. There you go, my friend. There you are. So my point is that's another tip. So we've given you 3 right now, and then we're going to talk about the importance and why it's so important. But 3, number 1, keep them progressing. Number 2, have a great equipment package that only black belts get. And number 4, really look at your curriculum and see, does it really look, feel, and seem different to the layman, to a student's eye, not necessarily you as an instructor, but to the customer? Does it look different? Is it different? Does it feel different? What else, Tass? How do we retain black belts? We're gonna have a contest. Who can come up with one?
Sure. So I think you said black belt only class. Didn't you say that as part of that?
I said we should absolutely try to have that.
Yeah, I would absolutely try and do that. In addition to that, every quarter you could have a black belt workout, right? Where it's just specific to your black belts, where it's a seminar. For sometimes some of the haters, right? Listen, we both came up in traditional systems, so we can talk about forms. As a matter of fact, I came up and did all 3 sets of forms for every belt rank. So, it's not me coming up in some freestyle system where I'm bashing on forms, right? The reality, and maybe a better way to look at it, is Metzger's in Orlando, and if he goes to the same theme park and does the same, which he doesn't do roller coasters, but if he did and went to the same theme park every day to the same roller coaster, even fun gets boring after a while. How many times are you going to go on the same roller coaster? So maybe a better way to look at that is like he said, when he said the second time, is what's different? What's going to excite those people to become, to stay training as a black belt? Because there's telling, there's teaching. We can tell them all what we want about, look, the black belt's just the beginning, which is what a lot of us say. But then we need to show them. So when there are those classes, they need to look and feel different. And then, and if you don't want to do quarterly, even, twice a year, have a black belt only get together where your black belts are getting together. Maybe you invite in a guest instructor and it's higher level stuff, and your black belts are just participating in that. Which, by the way, if you're doing it, 2, 3, 4 times a year, could be something which is why I wouldn't reduce my tuition for black belts. I could either pick up the tab on that, or you could charge a small fee for that, but it's for black belts only. Make them feel special in the school.
Do you charge for the training belt test? Is the test the same as their black belt test?
Great question.
Yes, we do charge because they get a certificate, and it could be a level 1 black belt, level 2 black belt, level 3, whatever. They get a certificate and they get their new belt, training belt. Plus it includes the stripe testing, not the degrees, but each month. And then it includes the test, the actual the test and the graduation and the belt and the certificate. And that charge is the same exact fee as our colored belts that pay. And for what we do, and we're under. I mean, for people who charge testing fees, we're low. We charge $40 for belt fees. And I can hear people wanting to sign off. That's ridiculous. You're nickel and diamond people. We could talk about that on another show. I'm not even going to defend that right now. But anyway, we charge that. Our black belt test is what, Tass? $299 now?
$299, yep.
$299, but that includes the embroidered black belt, that includes the training belt, that includes the Muay Thai pad, that includes the custom certificate, that includes the black belt t-shirt.
And 6 months worth of phase testings, by the way.
And 6 months worth of phase testings. Okay, so yes, we do that. And I just feel obligated. You can do anything you want in your school as long as you're honest and upfront with your customers before they sign up. Thank you. How to say it. Okay. Now, let's see. I know
there's people on here that charge way more for black belt testing than we do, man.
Right. And by the way, my guys came to me and we upped our fees $100. And I said, I don't want to just raise fees $100 on our people for black belt test. I don't want to raise it $100. I go, we need to add value. I said, so what can we include? Because I don't want to just say it's an extra $100 just to make money. So what did I include? Over $100 in equipment I included with that $100 increase. However, it's over $100 value to the customer, but we make money as a school, as a company, because we have margins, wholesale versus retail. So we don't nickel and dime. And I'm not saying anyone's saying that, but I'm just saying I want to make it clear that this is where this industry is so skewed, because people would hear that we charge for testing fees and all of a sudden we make an assumption, or we charge $299 for black belt test and people make an assumption. You just don't know all the facts and how we present it and how upfront and honest we are with our clients and customers before they even sign on the dotted line to enroll with us. So anyway, and here you go. We charge look, and this is not uncommon, $550 for first, second, and third dan, includes certificate and embroidered belt. There you go. I mean, and by the way, you could charge $5,000 as long as you say, Mrs. Johnson, before you enroll with us, I want to let you know there's a $40 fee for every time your child gets their next belt. But for black belt test, it's $5,000. And if you're not comfortable with that, then maybe we're not the school for you. Is that okay with you? And if they say, I don't mind, that's fine. Do it. I mean, but what we do is we really justify the value of it, with what we provide and what we do. And I'm not saying anybody else doesn't. It's just very important to me to make sure that we do that. Yes, we don't have junior black belts. We don't have juniors or senior black belts. If you're a black belt and you know the curriculum, you're a black belt and you know the curriculum. What do you mean? Dan test few includes 6 months of phase testing. What's that test?
Yeah, the fee.
What do you mean Dan test fee includes? Because there's 6 months of phase testings in order to get to your black belt graduation or the final part of the black belt.
Qualified, that from day one. Once they're qualified, right, which is 3.5 years later, there's 6 months worth of, just so people don't think we're doing black belt tests in 6 months.
Oh, no. It's 4 years or so, and then they can go into their 6 month preparation and testings to get to black belt. And if they don't pass, we only do 2 black belt tests a year. If they don't pass one of those phases, they will have to wait another 6 months from the time that test is, so that's just the way it is. Okay. Here's the next thing you got to do to retain your black belts. You must, and some of you put this in there in a way, but you must paint a picture for them and get a one-on-one meeting with every single new black belt candidate. Every single one. A one-on-one meeting to say, look, you're now in the black belt phase tests. You're going to be a black belt soon. Where do you really want to go? What do you want to specialize in once you get your black belt? Do you want to focus on competition? Do you want to focus on becoming an instructor? Do you want to focus on demonstrations and demos? Do you want to focus on weapons? Do you want to focus more on your sparring? Like, where do you want to take it now? What do you want to do? And you got to paint a picture for these people. But we ask every single person, have you ever thought of possibly having a career in martial arts? And if it's a child, right, we'll talk to the parent about what this really means, getting a black belt, what this really means. So let's say we have a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old and they're getting their black belt, right? Well, a lot of kids get normal jobs. They're going to work at the grocery store, they're going to work at the coffee shop, or they're going to do whatever, right? The normal high school jobs, whatever that is. But we make it clear that once you get your black belt, you've just opened the door of opportunities and options, especially if your child wants to work through high school and possibly college. They have an opportunity now to become an assistant paid instructor if that's a path they want to go down. So you got to paint the picture and paint it so they're motivated, because everybody says it too. A lot of these students, when they come in, there's a preconceived notion that black belt's the goal. Black belt's the goal. And how many times have you had somebody get their black belt and say, hey, I'm going to take a break now. I got my black belt. I did it. Got my black belt. Well, you got to change that mindset. You got to change that philosophy of what that really means. Black belt is the short-term goal. It's absolutely a goal. I have not met any martial artist or student who said my goal is blue belt, or my goal is green belt, or my goal is whatever belt. Our goal is black belt. When you sign up for martial arts, your goal is to get to black belt. But why? Why is that your goal? Because that's only a step towards my ultimate goal. Well, what is that ultimate goal? Could be self-defense, just long life of fitness and health. It could be opportunities to teach, to lead, to inspire. We need to find that out from the student because everyone has a different reason. And by the way, you also have to educate your people when they tell you, oh, my goal is just to get the black belt. You got to paint the picture and lead them down a path to where you can change that mindset, right? Because some people on here will say, once a black belt, always a black belt. I agree. You know, you've earned it, right? You've earned that black belt, and you're a black belt for life. But it doesn't mean you're still at the quality of black belt you once were. I mean, you can lose everything. You can lose timing, flexibility, health, power, technique, you know, your memorization of stuff. But at one point you earned it, but we want to keep it. We want to keep that going. Tass?
Just read a couple things here. Yeah, Mr. Weaver, word is getting out about the show. And Mr. McGraw, yeah, if they do fail, no, we do not charge them another testing fee. They simply will test the next time around, right? So that's the deal with that. Here's one that may be more passive, again, maybe controversial, but depending on whether or not if you do programs or not. I've seen this happen. Metzger was raised in a school like this, which is you pay for your training on a program. You're on a black belt program as an example. And so outcome-based programs where it's a green belt program or a blue belt program or a black belt program, you may retain a hell of a lot of red belts because nobody wants to test for black belt because they got to start to pay again. But even when they get their black belt, here's my point. It's an outcome-based program. So now what happens is they earn their belt, and now they need to start paying again. Maybe they haven't paid for a while, right? So instead of that, what I would encourage you to do is I would encourage you to look at your programs and have your programs time-based and always be looking at your expirations and your renewals. If someone, and I'll give you a couple different scenarios. We have times where we enroll somebody in our school in a basics program, and 3 to 5 months later, they enroll into our Black Belt Club program. And Black Belt Club is 36 months for us. So it's not enough time for them to get their black belt. They may expire 3 months or 4 months before they're going to get their black belt. We do not allow them to buy 3 or 4 months more additional time just to get their black belt. Without getting into all logistics, the minimum time frame that they can do with us is a 12-month time frame at that point. So what this does then is when they earn their black belt, they have 8 more months of training that they still have as a black belt. So look at your programs and whatever you guys are doing, but I would look to get them renewed prior to getting a black belt so their program carries them through first degree black belt and into their training, because now you have leverage when they're in 8 months, 9, 10 months. You say, guys, listen, you guys have been training for 10 months as a black belt. In the next 14 months, you guys are going to be second degree. Let's just get you guys a second degree. Now you've got a new goal and a new reason, some leverage to keep them, in that program as well. So that's more of a passive way to do it.
And by the way, here's how important it is. Let's talk about importance. We talked about ways to retain, but why is it so important to have black belts? They're really the backbone and inspiration of your school. You have to understand that. You as the instructor, to some of your students, you look unattainable, right? You look like, you're the master, you're the instructor. Like, man, I want to be like you someday, but man, I'll never be like you. Sometimes there's that, even if you tell them, my job is to make you better than me, this, that, and the other. But when you have students that have come through it, and they're the ones putting on performances and demonstrating techniques, they are such an example for all your other students. It helps with retention and culture throughout the entire school. And then the next thing is, the importance is, have you ever tried to find good instructors outside of your school? It's not easy, right? The best way to find help and good instructors is from within inside your school. How many of you have said this? God, I really need an assistant. I need help. I got the perfect person. One of my students, he's so good, he's dedicated, or she's dedicated, she's great, but she's 12. So I got to wait about 4 or 5 more years. Have you ever had that problem? And then you just kind of hang on and you wait until the birthdays come and you hope they're still training so we can hire this person. And by the way, some of you are hiring the 12-year-olds, which is fine, right? To help and assist it, I guess. But my point is this is why retention of black belts is so important, because it's going to give you opportunity to expand, right? It's going to give you a bigger opportunity to really change a student's life. You change their life just by them becoming a student. Do you know how much you change their life if you provide a career opportunity for them or give them the means to go open a school and continue teaching your philosophies and your teachings? I mean, that's where you really start changing lives, right? And by the way, every life they affect, you've had a hand in that, right? So it's so important, from the culture of your school to inspiring all the other students. And by the way, if you have younger black belts, because this is always more powerful, but not for adults necessarily, but for the kids, you should always have a new member mentor program, basically, to where when you sign up a new student, from that student's journey from white to yellow belt, and we'll talk more about this with Edge, right? Because we talked about this yesterday, and I think it's important. You assign a black belt student, or whoever, but preferably have a black belt student, maybe a little older than them, right? To mentor them to their first belt, to yellow belt. And that goes miles too, you know? Require them to be in at least one of their classes with them once a month, if not twice a month, if you can't do it once a week, to be there, to be their partner, to be there to encourage them. You know, it's a real important role, and that gives meaning to your black belt student, okay? So
going back to Metz, you know, we talked earlier about, you know, like really tracking your stats. If you look back, I'm having a deja vu moment. I don't know why, but if you look back and you say, hey, we do lose a lot of people from white to yellow belt as an example, by having that member mentor, I mean, with as easy as things are now between Snapchat, Instagram, or whatever the kids are using these days, I mean, you could connect those two people and imagine how much that could increase your retention rate of that white belt to yellow belt if they've got someone that's encouraging them for that, you know, first, whatever it is, 6 to 12 weeks, or however long it takes to get a yellow belt or your first belt in your system. So I think that's a huge one. And you can literally like write out a program for your member mentor. Here's week 1, week 2, week 3, and you have 12 little steps for them to follow, and then they personalize it and do what they want. I think that's amazing. That's something that, you know, we should be doing that we're not doing. But it would also,
by the way,
what's that?
You'll see this on the My Edge site, and we'll provide tools. Perry's listening, probably getting mad at me because he's going to talk about this as a My Edge thing.
But here's what I mean. I think you said it, Metz. But this provides two things. Number one, it provides that new student coming in feeling like they have someone that they can talk to, and we would pair them, you know, accordingly. And number two, it makes that black belt feel like they have purpose, which is where I was going to go next. And Metz, I don't know, you know, in my school when I was a kid, man, traditional Taekwondo school, every time testings were on Saturdays back in the day, and it was literally like a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. testing day. Everybody would show up. They'd bring up all the white belts. You would do, you know, your basic one step, your kick, your block, your board break, and then you sat down. And then you sat on the carpeted concrete floor for the next 7 hours while you watched everybody else do their tests. And then at the end, you were handed not a new belt. It was a hand-me-down belt from the next person who just earned their belt because the knowledge was transferred from one belt to the next. True story. Yeah. That was the way that we did it, right? And later I learned that instructors would be up dyeing white belts red, which you'd see on the white uniforms. You see the red dye all around them because they would dye the white belts because they don't want to buy the new belts. But what I did notice also is that they would have the black belts. All the black belts would be lined up, and they literally would stand there for the entire test. And sometimes they would help count with the test. They'd help hold boards, whatever. But they were being acknowledged. I mean, as silly as that may sound, and it's not maybe the right way to do it, but I think acknowledgement of your black belts and acknowledging who they are and the rank that they've achieved and giving them more purpose within the school goes a long way. And I know that's a big opportunity for us. And there's a lot of room improvement for us to be able to deal with our own people.
So here's something you've never heard me say, Tass. Breaking news. Everyone's going to hear it here first. And this is why we think we are pretty good at systemizing and running schools, because of the banter that we do and the feedback we get from all of you. But I want to start doing this, and I'm going to get my schools on this. So let me ask some questions here to everybody. How many of you, give me a thumbs up in the chat box, how many of you keep track of your attrition rates? Give me a thumbs up if you keep track on how well you retain your students for a percentage.
And remember, Metzger doesn't ask a question he doesn't know the answer to.
This is exciting. Tass, what would you do? You would give a thumbs up, right?
Back to one for each school.
Yeah. So how many of you track retention on how well you retain, your retention percentage? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you don't do it. And some of you with a thumbs up, unfortunately, like you've said it too, Tass, a lot of people don't understand the retention rate. They go by their software or whatever, and it's just not as accurate in keeping that. Come on, guys, participate. Thumbs up or thumbs down? What do you got? Let's see. Maybe everybody is, and it's just not registering.
Well, let's assume that they do, because I know your next question, I think.
Tass, let's see if you know, because you're I raised you.
If you do track your attrition rate, do you next track where you're losing your students?
Well, the next question is, that's right. But the next question, okay, thumbs down, haven't opened yet. Okay, well, that's why. All right, keep listening now. But need to do all, there you go. Mr. Lewis says, so the next question is, do you track retention percentages of just your black belts? Do you do that? Because most people do not. They'll say I had a 5% attrition last month, or I had a 2% attrition for the year, or 6% or whatever. But do you know what your attrition rate is for just black belts? Do you track that? And I'm thinking most people do not. But then there's another question. No. This is so important, guys. This is important. Now, we have tracked attrition for black belts, but this next part is where I want to make changes in our school, because this will be unbelievable. Unbelievable. Is everyone ready? Is everyone sitting down? Is everybody look? Is everybody like me?
Hey.
Look. Legs up on the counter, relaxed. I mean, come on, because this is big. This is game changing, what I'm going to say next.
And time's up, so I guess we'll be at the next Metz Tassoul Show to tune in and find out.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I got to run. Now, it's only hard in the beginning because it's not a habit. It's not routine. And Tass, you said it at the beginning. What did you say when you thought what my next question was as far as retention? Are you keeping track of where your students quit, right? Because I've talked about that before. I said, are we losing them at an intermediate level? Do we lose more of them at beginner level? Do we lose them more in an advanced? But you know what I want to do? I want to track retention by belt.
Oh, by belt. Yeah.
By belt. By belt. I want to know what my attrition is for just white belts. What's my attrition for just yellow belts? What's my attrition for just orange belts, green belts? Because when you see where you're losing the majority of your students, we broke it down into beginners, intermediates, and advanced. But I want to know by belt. I want to get that specific as far as what is the attrition rate of orange belts or green belts. And when if it's kind of like this, then you're okay, especially if your attrition is not bad. But if your attrition is like this, and there's like 2 belts where you lose the majority of your students, you can zone in on those specific belts and ask yourself questions. What's being taught? Are they squeezed in the middle of a higher belt and a lower belt? What's the time period that it took them to get to that belt? Why are we losing them at this belt rank? and we can make changes and increase our retention. And by the way, Taz can teach you a thing or two about how much retention adds to your bottom line. Go ahead.
With everybody here as my witness, the reason I'm smiling is, did I say the same thing earlier and Metz just taking credit for it right now? Because I think I said the same thing earlier.
By belt? Did you say that?
Yeah.
Or did you?
No,
by belt.
By belt. So how many yellow, like white belts? Are we losing more white belts? Are we losing more black belts? Are we losing this? Yes.
Well, maybe that's why I had the epiphany. It came to me 10 minutes later.
It really happens because he really doesn't pay attention to me, but then he hears it later.
So let me ask you: is there anyone on here, including you, Taz? Have you ever done that?
No, I've been well intentioned about doing it, but I've never taken the time to do it.
Have you ever met somebody that does it?
Not by belt. No.
The further we can go ahead.
Well, we know how. I mean, look, it'll be. Here's the thing, right? It's trust and validate. And I told you this earlier this year when I did my attrition for all of last year for both my locations, and I was shocked at the numbers because my gut was wrong, and I was like, "How is this possible?" And I went back and back and back, and it was way better than what I thought it was, right? And so here's the thing, like. The aha moments you're going to have, my gut tells me it's going to be white belts and black belts are going to be the two biggest, highest attrition belts, right? That's what my gut tells me. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to do the exercise, because you need to validate what that is, because what happens if you realize that in your school that you've got a bunch of orange belts, that's where the spike is. And in our case, I already know what that challenge and problem would be, that our guys just aren't nominating them enough and getting them in the Black Belt Club. But at any rate, it's I think a very, very good exercise, which Master, Bolton here is asking, how do we do that, right? So go ahead there, Genie.
Well, look, first of all, I like to keep things simple. It really is simple. You would have to, first of all, you cannot do this unless you've kept track of your stats in the past, because you'd have to go back. I would want to go back 5 years. I'd want to go back 5 years. And there's a couple things you have to do. You would have to look at, like, let's just say, for example, 2016. How many white belts, how many yellow belts? I'd have to make a list of people. How many, or whatever your belt ranking system is, how many of them went to that? And I'd have their names and the rank, right? And then I would take 2016 first. And then I would look, if you want to do an annual retention, then I would look, well, how many of those people were there a year? Okay. When did they quit? Did they quit? Like, this student quit 6 months later. Okay. Well, 6 months later, they weren't a white belt or a yellow belt. Like, or you got to look at your quits and find out when did they quit? What belt were they when they quit? But you can't do that unless you've tracked that already, which, do people track that? I mean, are you tracking when a student quits? What do you do with that? Do you just cancel it and just move on with your life and they're done and they're out? Or do you make a note and keep a file? I mean, what do? You have to keep track. So if you did not keep track of that, starting today, every time you see somebody stop coming or stop paying or officially come in and say, we're not renewing or we're quitting, you should put them in a file. And by the way, we don't care about their name necessarily for this exercise. We don't care about their name. So if you have 9 belts, white, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple, red, brown, black, right? Get a sheet of paper, put the date it is today, and put it in your yellow belt file. At the end of a year, let's open up the files and let's see where we had the most people quit, right? But that'll tell you where the majority of people are quitting. And then as a percentage, you have to know your active count and how many of each belt you have. But it gets harder. But right now, at least make a file and just put it in the file of your belt colors anytime somebody quits. So you can see, what if there's a file like it's this thick and it happens to be your blue belt file? Then you have a problem with your blue belts. You have a problem with your curriculum. You have a problem with your class schedule, maybe. So like you'll look at your schedule and say, my gosh, I always had a class offered after 6 p.m. as a beginner and green belts, but at blue belt, I only have one time for them, and it's before 5 o'clock or so. And so that could be the problem, right? So it allows us to go in and really check to see where our issues are.
And then not jump into conclusions, but that may also be where you take some of your black belts, going back to black belt retention, and you pair them back up with and you have them mentor the blue belts as an example, or the advanced greens right before they get to blue, before they do quit, so that we can get them, maybe potentially get them past that mark. I mean, there's once we know the problem, right, there's so many things that we can do to fix it. The challenge is knowing where and what the problem is. And all of us on here are just guessing, because every one of our schools may be a little bit different. I have a client, and Mr. Henkel. Mr. Henkel has an incredible retention of black belts. Incredible. Like, it's like 40% of his school, I think, are black belts. So he does an incredible job with retention. And then what you do is you find out, on the black belt retention side, you find out what people are doing, who has a lot of black belts and who has retained a lot of their black belts more specifically, and what are they doing in their school to keep those black belts. I think that's an important part to look at. But yeah, that'll be an interesting number to start tracking and be able to watch it over time.
Hey everyone, look at this question, and this is common too, right? Are your lobbies more full during beginner classes than they are for intermediate or advanced classes with parents? And the answer is probably yes, right? Because once parents get comfortable, they'll drop their kids off, they'll sit in the car. Here's a simple solution for that. And I'm making this up. On the first Wednesday of every month is parent participation day, or parent coaches day. First Wednesday of every month. We need the parents to be in class with their kids first Wednesday, or first week of every month, first Tuesday or Wednesday or Monday and Tuesday, whatever people come to class, right? And we're going to have the parents do some drills with the kids. So it's really important that you're here. It'll only take a couple times if you're consistent with this, where a child is in class, parents dropped them off, everyone else has their parent. I promise you that child will tell their parent, I was the only one, you weren't there. And you send out emails and reminders, and you can do the text that, hey, the first week of every month is parent participation. We require all parents to come into at least one class with their child in the first week to do drills. Or, I was going to say sibling or spouse or whatever, but parents, because you don't need to do this for adults. But that's the answer, sir. And now you will get them involved more, and they can hear the announcements and see the value. Okay. Yep. Oh, by the way, Tass, we don't have this, right?
Pastor Bolton, I'll have to check my CRM. That's funny. Yeah, pull all that stuff up. The CRM companies, listen, CRM companies, I'm saying they need the data for themselves, right? So they got to pull it so they can see it. Gosh, that's
do we still have that old tracking sheet Excel that tracked belts and reason for quitting? I don't think we have that, right, Tass? We don't have that on the site.
We have a new version of that, I'm sure, shortly.
Right. Yeah. No, Mr. Walls, I don't think we have that. All right. So there you go, Mr. Bolton. I know how you guys love that. Okay. Any questions? You understand the importance, how important it is to retain those black belts, and how important it is, and the reasons and how to do it.
And Metz, everyone, this is where everybody can sit down, whether it's, you with maybe some of your black belts, even if you're a one-man show or one-woman show, or you've got a small team, or you're doing this with your spouse, whatever. But sit down. We're just scratching the surface right now. What other things can you provide in your school, your culture, that will really play into retaining your black belts? I know some people do black belt retreats. I'm not necessarily saying for or against that. But there's lots of different things that you absolutely can do. But sitting down and taking the time just to brainstorm and do a brain dump and get all those ideas written down doesn't mean you have to execute all of them. But you're going to, and this crazy stuff, like I remember, you know what I did for black belt retention? This didn't work, but I did it years ago. This is when I was in my early 20s, man. We were all going to go skydiving. All the black belts were going to go skydiving. So all of our adult black belts. So I showed up.
By the way, that could be the worst retention tool ever. It could be.
Yeah. Well, we would go there. But I showed up that day, and literally, I was probably 23 at the time, and The other person out of like the 15 other adult black belts we had at the time, adult black belts, and they were all in their like, most of them were their late, like 19 to mid 20s, right? So I thought it was going to be perfect. The only other person that showed up was a guy who was in his 40s, and nobody else showed up. So of course, I went and did this. We both did the skydiving that day, and my parents actually, they never went to a lot of tournaments, but they came out to watch me that day. I thought they probably figured I might fall to my death, so they should come see me, watch me one last time. But anyway, did the skydiving thing, and then the next week in classes, I went back and said, I thought you guys were black belts. You guys didn't show up for skydiving, right? But just come on, what are some different ideas you guys can do? And I'm not saying that that's the best one. I'm just saying that was an old one. It's just like whipping your students with belts wasn't a good idea back in the day, but some of us did that.
That's interesting. I didn't know that, Tass.
Yeah.
I didn't know you did that. But anyway, there it is, everybody. I mean, some retention ideas, and by the way, let's give Tass credit where credit's due. Start tracking each belt on where they quit. But Tass, I'm surprised that neither you or I have never done that.
I know. I've thought about it many, many, many times, and I'm just like, it's a lot of work because I was going to go back. But
hey, by the way, that's what the clients are saying right now, and that's the reason why, like you and me, they won't do it. But if you do what I just said, just start now. At the very minimum, somebody quits. What was their age? What was their rank? Put it in that file so we can go back and look at it in a year and count them up.
Yep.
I mean, let's make it simple.
Right on.
Okay? Right on. So there it is.
Over Niagara Falls. That'd be fun, Mr. Weaver.
He doesn't.
I think he's a professional skydiver. Does a lot of skydiving.
Mr. Weaver?
Yeah. Pretty cool.
It's not for me. I don't know.
Well, the roller coaster.
I did do it with a big fan under me, in I Drive.
How was that?
It was awesome.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Close your eyes. You won't know the difference.
It is the same thing. The drop is only 6 feet, though. So it's not bad. You know what I mean? Well, it's a beautiful day. We're going to take advantage of it. It's always great being on the show, guys, and just talking and seeing how we can help. We appreciate you tuning in. We really do. I said 2021, this is our year as an industry. We got to get focused and break some records now. Impact more lives, grow these schools, and make a bigger difference, and a difference in your life too.
Right on.
Make some more revenue. It's okay, everybody. It's okay. Okay. No, there's not enough Xanax, Mr. Blackman. There's not. So anyway, even though oddly enough, I'd feel more comfortable just carrying the only carry-on bag I take on flights is a parachute backpack. But I feel better for some reason, even though I don't want to use it.
Yeah, Metz hates flying, and we had there's a friend of the family who got his pilot's license years ago, and he always says, landing is nothing more than a controlled crash. So every time you're landing, Metz, just remember it's a controlled crash.
Well, I don't remember anything from the flights, as you know, Tess.
Oh yeah.
All right. Last thing, just on the flying stuff here. Most students we taught at airborne school had 5 night jumps, even though 4 of them were during the day. Eyes closed the whole way. Very good. The whole way down.
That's fun.
All right, guys. Great seeing everybody. Have an awesome time. 2 weeks from now, we'll be back at you live from the Maya Wealth Seminar here in Orlando and the Maya Elite Seminar. Tass will be here, and we'll pop in and do a sneak preview. But we'll be back next week. We have a topic next week, and then the week after that, we'll be on for a little sneak peek of what's going on at the Wealth event and the My Elite event. So thank you, guys.
All right,
have a great one. Good luck.
We'll talk later. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.